Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now to take a look at the news stories making headlines across the globe is Arise News correspondent Aron Akerejola. Good morning, Aron. How are you today?
Good morning, OJ.
Hi, Aron.
Good to see you.
Welcome. Yes, good to be here.
I'm sure you're happy to see her, OJ.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
She's been on sabbatical.
I like that.
She's been on sabbatical, and probably she went for a little tree.
Did you miss me, Aron?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
I did.
All
Because
right.
you're looking all glowing.
Aron, let's take this first.
All right, we started off from Nigeria. Tell you that the Nigerian government has told the National Industrial Court, the NIC, sitting in Abuja, that negotiations are still ongoing with regards to the proposed 30,000 naira new minimum wage. The federal government made this disclosure on a day both the Nigerian Labour Congress, the NLC, and the Trade Union Congress shown the legal action that resulted to the ex-parte order that stopped them from embarking on a nationwide industrial action to protest the non-implementation of the new minimum wage for workers.
Well, as it turned out, only the lawyer representing the federal government and the Attorney General appeared before Justice Kado at the Industrial Court yesterday. That case had been there, and it was after the order was given by that particular court on November 2 that Labour, called off a strike. The main position of the court at that time was that, Labour should not go on strike and that the status quo antebellum should be maintained and that nobody should do anything that will affect the subject matter of the matter before the industrial court one way or the other. However, why this is of interest is that, the lawyer, I think his name was Omowo Toba, told the court that the parties involved are still negotiating. However, the defendants were not in court and that the court should give them enough time to allow the negotiations to take place. So what the judge then did was to postpone the case till, I think, January 29, with the hope that by January 29, the court would like to see whatever terms of agreement may have been reached by the parties involved in this particular litigation, in this particular dispute. However, this, of course, is of public interest to the extent that Nigerians had assumed that the strike having been averted and the report of the tripartite committee meeting having been submitted to President Buhari, that the matter had been laid to rest. But there is this still lingering controversy over whether it will be, some other figure different from the 30,000 that Labour is agreed upon. But Labour has also reacted because apart from the appearance in court yesterday, you will recall that the spokesman for the president, Femi Adesina, also issued a statement that, people should stop speculating, that the president has not mentioned any particular figure, that the committee report that has been presented to the president will be taken through due process. However, in response to that, Labour has made it clear that the original proposal that they put before government was 66,500. And during discussions in the negotiation process, they agreed now to 30,000. That one kobo out of that 30,000 naira will be unacceptable to Labour.
So there's no negotiation going on right now, Dr. Abati. So who are they negotiating with at this point?
That may be a matter of misrepresentation, but the lawyer just made it clear that, look, some kind of dialogue is going on, and they will need an adjournment of the case. It's just a way of, getting the court to give another date, hoping that before that time comes, there will have been greater clarity. But Labour, of course, has made it clear that if government does not act on the 30,000 that was agreed upon, then they will know what to do. They will go back to the table and declare a strike, as it were. This was the position of the Nigerian Labour Congress General Secretary, Peter Esom. But let's just hope that, this will be resolved, that President Buhari will take the right decision, and that the bill attached to the report will go expeditiously to the National Assembly, and that the National Assembly will also see the need to lay the ghost of this controversy to rest.
And there are so many risk factors with the strike that Labour is threatening to impose. So many risk factors like, health, access to health, or even like the people that are disposed right now due to the flooding. I mean, what's going to happen to all these types of people with disabilities? It's going to be a serious issue if this is not resolved as soon as possible.
I understand where the federal government is coming from, but I've always flawed these particular governments on one particular ground, on one major ground, which is the way they respond to critical issues. Life itself, especially with politics, especially democracy, is all about the optics. And when the optics don't always look good, when the optics always feel like the federal government are actually very slow in responding to the needs of people, or probably giving definitive answer or giving definitive direction, as we've seen time and time again, whether it was when the president was away out of the country for so long that he could not they could not give a very, very viable explanation, or to several major germane issues. This is not how to go about it. And the opaqueness and the vagueness that has actually followed this particular administration is what is hurting it the most. And I actually hope as we're getting closer to the polls in 2019, it doesn't actually destroy them.
Well, that's a very strong phrase. But, I mean, let's deal with every issue, on a case-by-case basis, on its own merit.
I'm hoping, because the point is, and everybody, because at a certain point, everybody is a little bit, there was a little bit of reprieve. I say that at least the federal government has increased the wage. We need to take time in reality before it actually matures and actually comes to fruition. But now hearing that they want to still review, counter-review, and keep reviewing and saying that, okay, we're not even sure of what the president will do.
No, I think we should go with a statement by the president's spokesperson. I mean, a report has been placed before the president for consideration. In a situation like this, it remains some kind of advice. Now, it's for the president to act on it. So maybe we should not prejudge him. Maybe we should not preempt him. Okay? Let us wait and see what the president, comes up with. And I'm sure that the president himself will be monitoring, the controversy, the undercurrents, and all of that. And we'll see, what happens at the end of the day. But what is clear is that he has agreed, the government has agreed in principle, that the new national minimum wage needs to be reviewed.
Yes.
So let's see what the outcome of that is. We know where all the stakeholders stand in the matter.
We're talking about 30,000 naira. I mean, what can 30,000 naira really do in a household, if you think about it?
So if you don't check inflation and other indices that actually comes with that. All right, so
next story.
Let's actually move on. I tell you that President Muhammadu Buhari has declared a state of emergency on Nigeria's water supply, sanitation, and hygiene sector. Let's say that Buhari made this declaration at the inauguration of the National Action Plan and revitalization of the water supply, sanitation, and hygiene sector at the State House Conference on Thursday in Abuja. He directed governments at all levels to intensify efforts and work towards meeting the nation's water supply and sanitation needs. Buhari warned that henceforth federal government support to state governments will be based on their commitment to implementing the National Wash Action Plan in their respective states and to end open defecation by 2025.
No, this is a great initiative, right, Dr. Bati? But I mean, how many state of emergencies can we really truly say that we have in Nigeria? Is it just that?
Well, there are some people who will hold your view and say that perhaps, there should be a declaration of emergency even in other sectors.
Of the power Nigerian sectors everywhere.
Yes, well, but in this particular case, this has to do with public health. I mean, we were here a few weeks ago when we were discussing the outbreak of cholera in Zimbabwe. And, the whole issue was about this public water, pipe-borne water supply system. Now, the responsibility to supply water, ensure sanitation, and ensure hygiene is a responsibility belongs to the territory of states and local governments. So I think it's a good thing that there is even a national plan, which means that there is a role also for the federal government, maybe in terms of providing infrastructure to make it easier to, implement this national wash plan, which is on the water supply, sanitation, and hygiene. And if you look at the statistics, as at 2015, only 7% of the Nigerian population had access to potable water, which is scandalous because that percentage now may have even gone down by 2018. Nigeria, in the global rating for open defecation, Nigeria is rated as #2 in the world.
Yes.
And 25% of Nigerians defecate openly. Even if we do not have the statistics, we have the evidence of our eyes, which we cannot disbelieve. Nigeria is probably one of the few countries, you know, where you see people defecating openly, you know, and they are doing so, they are also making a phone call, and they seem to be enjoying what they are doing. You know, when you look at around Nigeria, even in the city of Lagos, people will like... No, I mean, that's how we can properly explain what's going on. You see all over Lagos, you know, and some other cities, do not urinate here. Yes. Do not urinate here. I mean, Nigeria must be one of the very few countries in the world where people have to be told, do not defecate here, do not urinate here. Because, you know, sanitation remains a major challenge. The local councils, this is also about governance. The local councils have not been doing well. State government sometimes doesn't pay enough attention to hygiene. So I think the whole idea of having, you know, a national water supply, sanitation, and hygiene program is to further sensitize us. Yeah. And it's also to further wake up, you know, the states and the local councils to the strategic importance of this in terms of health, public health. I mean, in 2015, we couldn't meet the Millennium Development Goals target in terms of water, sanitation, and hygiene. And there's no indication, except government becomes proactive in this regard, that we'll meet the XDG goal 6.1, 6.2 on water supply, sanitation, and hygiene by 2030. The only thing that then remains also perhaps is for government, you know, at the relevant levels to begin to sensitize Nigerians. Yeah, potable water supply may be a problem, right? So people resort to self-help, they dig boreholes and all of that. But hygiene or sanitation, this also is about, you know, the way our people behave. But maybe there should be a lot of public enlightenment.
Yes, there should be public enlightenment. But, you know, just think about the statistics that you just read. Even just ordinary things like pipe-borne water. A metropolis like Lagos, 70% of us do not have access to pipe-borne water in our homes. Yeah. I mean, what would they result to?
Well, water is life, you know, and when you have a water crisis, it is, you know, life itself that is threatened. It is true that, you know, the water crisis is a global crisis. It's not just, you know, Nigeria that is affected in terms of water supply. But the thing is, you know, having quality access to potable water. You see people selling sachet water in traffic. You see people selling all kinds of water. Water supply, water production has become a major industry, you know. And that has that. Yeah, and, you know, there have also been questions about the quality of the water, you know, despite the NAFDAC certification that Nigerians drink. So if you investigate it further, I think the government is right to declare this a national emergency.
Yeah,
they must be commended for actually doing that.
Yeah. So let's go over to Egypt real quick.
Let's tell you that an Egyptian court has given a long-term jail term to 60 people accused of forming a terrorist cell affiliated to the Islamic State group. 19 of the defendants were imprisoned for life and the rest were sentenced to 15 years behind bars. It is understood that the group's activity was to be focused in the south of the country.
We were talking about this earlier, Dr. Bati, and you were talking about what it means to be sentenced for life in Egypt.
Well, life imprisonment in Egypt means 25 years in prison. But the more important thing is what the government of Egypt has been trying to do since 2014 with the exit of the Morsi government and the Muslim Brotherhood to deal with insurgency, to deal with religious extremism, to deal with sheer violence. And this is not the first time that persons will be sentenced to jail or to life imprisonment on account of, you know, acts bordering on association with the Islamic State, violent activities, terrorism. You have the Cairo Criminal Court. You have the military court. In this case, we're dealing with the military court. And then you, of course, have the regular courts. In this particular case, in 2016, these persons who have been sentenced, they attacked, you know, soldiers and killed some soldiers. In 2018, the issue with insurgency in Egypt had become so serious that, in fact, the military launched what is called Sinai 2018, which was to check terrorism in the northern part of Egypt. Before now, in 2017, 72 persons were sentenced. In fact, a year earlier, over 700 people were put on a trial. So you have this issue, you know, in Egypt, and the government trying to do all it can to check, one, the threat of the Muslim Brotherhood and attacks on Egyptian Coptics and Anglicans, terrorism by the Islamic State. And I think that, well, it's a good development. People who break the law must be made to face the wrath of the law. However, they have recourse to the option of appeal.
Right.
But I think the important thing is that the law taking its course and the Egyptian authorities making sure, of course, that they too do not descend to the level of persecuting persons on the grounds of religious beliefs.
Yeah, the Egyptian government must be commended for actions like this, because you and I know that terrorism has taken its toll on Egypt. And tourism has actually has suffered deeply. Egypt used to be a massive tourist attraction here in Africa, but right now, because of all...
Still my destination spot, though.
Okay.
I still would love to go to Egypt.
To visit the pyramids, I guess.
Yes, before I die, hopefully I get to see this pyramid.
Hopefully. We're hoping
I've
to
been
be...
there before,
Yeah?
twice.
Oh, nice.
Used to be a very lovely place.
But when terrorists were being kidnapped and killed, that all sent the wrong message around the world. And if a government is deciding to be proactive enough, or probably if a government is deciding to punish those they find guilty, it only sends the right message that they are beginning to check this level of terrorism that has almost engulfed Egypt. And maybe with time, they can be able to sanitize Egypt again, and tourism might begin to boom again.
Let's keep our fingers crossed.
We'll keep our
All right,
fingers
so let's
crossed.
go over to the U.S.
And let's tell you that a tough Texas judge has released all defendants before him, reportedly saying it was what voters wanted a day after he lost his re-election bid. According to reports, Republican Judge Glenn Delvin let 7 juvenile defendants go on Wednesday, including some charged with violent crimes. Witnesses say before releasing the defendants, he asked them if they plan to kill anybody. And the American Civil Liberty Union is demanding an investigation.
This is such a strange story, Dr. Abati, yes? I mean, do you think that he did it in spite out of his loss? Like,
You are right. I think it's stranger than fiction.
Yes.
And, clearly Judge Devlin here has not acted professionally. He has acted against his own record, because he's on record as having been, one of the 2 judges, he and Judge Phillips, another judge in the Harris County district, who have been responsible for one-fifth of all the, convictions of juvenile defendants. But in this particular case, he just decided to let them go, even if the Harris County office, was saying that, well, it was just 7 out of 13 that were let go. But out of those 7, 4 of those kids alone were, before the court for criminal armed robbery charges. And the other thing, of course, is that they were all released without they being handed over to their parents or guardians. So the whole argument is that this poses a threat both to those children and to the community.
Yes,
In fact, 2 of them had mental health challenges. And the surprise is that, Judge Devlin would not have done this, under ordinary circumstances. But you then look at it, we're all human. He lost election, he's a Republican, a Republican judge. So he lost election the previous day to a Democrat, Natalia Oakes. And then the following day, he had to be in court. So maybe that's what we should be looking at. Yes. Maybe if a man loses election like that, you don't allow him to go to work the following day. I mean, he has to deal with the trauma of loss.
They will say Christmas actually came very early.
Yeah, can you imagine him going around asking, are you going to kill somebody? Okay, and then the person will be like, yes, I'm going to kill someone. Like, who would actually say that?
Which is a very strange question for a judge. So he was obviously making a personal statement. Yes. And so the outrage from the Civil Liberties Union is understandable. But the good news, of course, is that Natalia Oakes, who is taking over, the Democrat who is taking over from him, has said, well, there will be a reset scheduled for, I think, January 4, and the matter will be tried again, and the right thing will be done.
And they're conducting thorough investigation on him right now.
Well, yes, the Texas Department for Judicial Conduct, is saying that it's going to look into the case, because even when you are no longer a judge, your conduct as a judge can still be reviewed. But I think that the thing is that when a man is in an emotional mood, you know, judges are also human beings.
Exactly.
You will just say, well, this is what you people want. You don't want me.
You
want
fragile states of mind.
You want the Democrats. Okay, let's do justice differently. He's just been, I guess, emotional because he's not the only one. He's not the only conservative judge who has lost his seat. In Harris County alone, you know, up to about 59 judges have lost their positions, you know, in this anti-conservative wave in the state.
Well, let's see more developments soon. I hope that he gets thoroughly investigated.
Well, he has gone on vacation. Nobody can reach him.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Well, Aron, thank you so much for joining us on this segment. It was such a nice segment today.
Yeah, so always good to be here.
All right. We'll see you later.
Yeah, we'll be back later.
All right. Thanks, Aron. That's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now.